Yeah, hi and welcome to the Let's Tech Pod. This is our 21st episode. My name is Henrik and this is Cody Consulting sitting in central Gothenburg. We're in the office right now, and today we're welcoming Juho Lindman. Welcome, Juho.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
And it's going to be a really exciting topic because you're Associate Professor of Informatics at the Department of Applied IT at the University of Gothenburg, right?
That is correct.
And you're also the director of the blockchain lab.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why we invited you, to talk about blockchain. It's a very hot topic and obviously a technology that has been a lot of buzz around and both hyped, and sometimes you hear that, you shouldn't use it. I mean, when I asked around the office here for possible questions to ask, they said that if you have a product owner who says that now we're going to apply blockchain or AI for that matter, that then you should have like a water spray in their face and tell them to wake up, so it doesn't hurt them, but to get them to wake up and realize that that's not probably what we need to do at this place in particular. So I don't know, have you heard sentiments like that before?
Yeah. So there's few things kind of maybe it's good to put to the table right in the beginning. Yeah. So one is of course that the hype which is around the technology, and that's of course totally overblown. So the kind of in this kind of situation where a product owner kind of is in kind of trying to kind of say few things about it, it's often quite difficult because everybody already has some kind of opinion of what it is. Yeah. Everybody already kind of, some people have a good opinion. Some people kind of might technically know how sound and what it can do, what it can do. Some people might have an idea that they read over the internet that it's going to solve like a million different things. And maybe a third class of people are generally skeptical towards a number of things. And blockchain, it's pretty easy to be very skeptical towards blockchain. There is a good and bad with that comes with that. So the good thing is that you, of course, with any new technology that's disruptive, there is a certain level of hype. There's a certain level of kind of very high expectation. And those expectations are very often very useful in terms of kind of selling the technology. But they might be difficult when people kind of get an idea of what the technology is, which is wrong or sets the expectations level too high. Yeah. And that is, I think, a real issue in relation to this blockchain space, and a real issue anybody who wants to take the technology seriously kind of needs to look into.
Yeah, so I once also saw, I can actually bring it up here on the screen. I saw this little flow chart where it says, should I use blockchain to solve my problem? And it's the flow chart just has one arrow out of it saying no. But what if, oh my God, no. So that's no. Then there's like the longer one, which is should you use blockchain? And then are you making cryptocurrency? Yes. Please stop. Or no. And then no, don't use blockchain. So, it's obviously making fun of it, the whole technology, but you've seen these kind of flowcharts before, of course.
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure is it actually making fun of the technology or the hype around the technology. So I think that's a distinction which is kind of useful to make.
I mean, it's very connected to, like we mentioned already, the word cryptocurrency, and obviously Bitcoin being the most famous one.
Yeah, it's been up again a little bit like lately. So
yeah, exactly.
It's causing a buzz again.
I saw that it was around $10,000 now, and it was 2 years ago there was a real peak at about almost $20,000.
Yeah.
So it's been unstable or volatile, but still carrying a great value.
Yeah. It's kind of it's also interesting because the kind of, so many blockchain people, people operating in the blockchain space or kind of that are engaged with it would say that it's always a good idea to kind of distinguish between Bitcoin on one hand, on like the cryptocurrency and the token, and then on the blockchain, the underlying technology on the other hand. Yeah. On the other hand, always when Bitcoin prices start to go up, it's becoming interesting for a number of people who, if they're actually serious about making this distinction, shouldn't really be kind of very concerned about that.
Yeah, exactly. So it is inherently linked together, those two concepts, of course. But should we start then by going into what is blockchain? Because I think that's not at all obvious question. I mean, even if you might have heard one explanation before, probably don't remember it very well. And so what is it?
That discussion is not always very easy to take. And before I kind of go into the definition, I would want to say kind of one thing, which is blockchain can be viewed as at least in two different ways. Okay. So one is the idea that it's kind of almost philosophical, trust machine, transparent new technology that will transform organizations radically, that will do dramatic changes in them. Yeah. And another view is that it's a kind of a technology similar to some other technologies, which is more like has specific functionalities, and it can be used for kind of to complement the current things that are happening in organizations. And these things are for sure connected.
Yeah.
But often, especially when people who are kind of very, well, maybe not so tech savvy, they kind of usually take this more philosophical approach and say that blockchain will transform trust in society completely. It will make third parties obsolete in a number of areas, for example. That's more like a philosophical claim. A more kind of tools-based or more like a technological claim would be to say that it can be used as a logging system or to track cars and people, patients, something like that, or in a very transparent way. And that might be kind of there might be beneficial use cases to use it something like that.
Yeah, and more the technology itself. Then, what is the blockchain? What's it referred to?
So the idea is that we don't with any kind of peer-to-peer technology, but with blockchain specifically, it's kind of architectural design where you have a situation where you have a network of nodes. And that's the kind of the first requirement. Yeah. Usually these nodes in these blockchain systems, they're kind of applications that run on their own and they form a kind of a coherent whole. Blockchain or distributed technology, in this I use them as same thing, but they're not, but I will use them just to kind of roughly limit the topic a little bit.
That's good, I think, yeah. Since it's so complex, so let's make some simplifications.
Yeah. So you have this network where you have peers, and the idea is that these peers are not above each other. Specific
no
point
authoritative
of vulnerability.
source.
Yeah. No trusted third party needed basically for this structure. Now, on top of that, each one of these individual nodes has the full transaction history of the ledger, or think of Bitcoin in there.
Yeah.
So the transaction history is held by all the nodes.
Yeah.
And then transactions are added individually in each one of these nodes. So what this kind of basically means is that you can't change the transaction histories within one of the nodes if all the nodes still have the kind of transaction history that's untampered with, which it makes it quite tamper resistant. That's a kind of a very kind of traditional way of looking at blockchain. So you have the network level, you have ledgers which each one of the individual node holds, and those are usually immutable. So you only add stuff to the end, and you're only allowed to add like one specific thing. This is the kind of the core kind of architecture of what it could look like.
Yep.
And then on top of that, you could have like a service, like a cryptocurrency, for example, could be thought. So for the cryptocurrency, you would have a public key infrastructure, meaning that you have public and private addresses, and that you are sending kind of, in this case, cryptocurrency tokens, Bitcoin. You're sending from your public address to another specific public address on the chain. And this transaction would be signed, and you would be signed it by using your private key in this case. And then the person who would get the money could only kind of get it if they would know their own public key and private key.
So I guess one way to think about it is like if you have it's trying to solve a certain problem. For example, if you have a bank and you want to keep track of how much money each customer has, then most banks, I guess, have a central master database, and the bank is the authoritative source for exactly how much money each person has. And then they have to solve certain problems. So someone tries to withdraw money, then they deduct that from the master database, and they make sure that you can't withdraw money from two bankomats at the same time and withdrawing the same money. So they have to solve certain problems, but it's much easier because they can always rely on the one central database, basically.
Yeah.
And the blockchain is trying to solve a similar thing, but there's no central database. Instead, the database is out in the open, and it's many persons or applications or peers that are keeping track of and getting a common view of what the transaction log is, or the ledger.
Exactly. So it's exactly like that. So all the individual nodes would kind of have the full earlier transaction history, and when somebody attempts to make a payment, the system would check from the ledger, which everybody has, that there is enough unspent money on that particular account.
And then it's very important then how you kind of add new common knowledge or common understanding items to the master ledger. I mean, there is of course, very beautiful algorithm here in how you agree on adding stuff to the ledger, which is very important with the time stamping of things. And then you have a difficult problem to solve, right? Something I'm trying now to just from memory here. And then you reward the persons or computers who help the system to add new items to the ledger by solving this difficult problem. So they get a little bit of money from the Bitcoin.
Yeah. It works exactly like so. This is called this is what's called the mining, the proof of work system. But exactly. I want to know that that's not the only way to build blockchain systems, but that's how Bitcoin works, and Bitcoin is often the most useful example.
It's the one that people would know about a bit. So
yeah, and it's quite battle tested. It's been around over 10 years, so that's actually quite old in terms of technology. So
that's very cool.
Mature.
So we touched upon some of the how it works and the complexity of this technology. Maybe we should return to then talk about what kind of research you do now at the blockchain lab at GU, Gothenburg University.
For the last few years, we have been most interested in public sector and how public sector is engaging with the technology. Yeah. And of course, our research it's drawing on this quite strong Swedish tradition of public sector research, but also things that we know about digitalization related to public sector authorities. And we are one of the only research centers globally that really kind of focuses on public sector use cases. So often blockchain research is organized around, for example, fintech or cryptocurrencies. What we are trying to see is how public sector organizations are currently kind of engaging with the technology, and what problems they might be having or what problems they are having, and how they are thinking of solving those issues.
One follow-up question on this thing with cryptocurrencies was, what advantages do you see with using blockchain and cryptocurrencies in comparison to like standard currencies and ways of dealing with money? One
of the benefits, as we mentioned with the original Bitcoin, had to do with that you would be able to carry it out with trusted third parties, so that basically you wouldn't need so much central banks or governments to have a role in that system, because you could technically move Bitcoin from one place to another as long as you have internet architecture. So that means that you don't maybe need a bank account in places where it's difficult to get, or you could do parts of the transfers pseudonymously. But the idea originally was that it wouldn't be tracked, but Bitcoin can be tracked. Yeah. So it's not like that anymore.
And I guess there are thousands different cryptocurrencies apart from Bitcoin now. So yeah. They have different features like fast small transactions, or maybe that you cannot track exactly where the money came from all the way back.
But I do want to mention also cryptocurrencies. There is an element usually related to speculation of their value. So many people see them as more like an investment than a direct payment system. And Bitcoin, of course, especially has also drawbacks.
Yeah. What are the risks with cryptocurrencies? What drawbacks?
So with Bitcoin, there has been a lot of discussion over the media about proof of work energy usage and computational power usage. Yeah, that has a little bit at least gone down, but I think it's a real problem. Another one is
the demanding problem that you need to kind of seal the deal on, that you have a new part to put on the ledger. Yeah, it becomes more and more energy demanding.
Exactly. So what it does is the algorithm is built in a way that it makes crypto puzzles more difficult to solve if they're solved too fast. So that's roughly how it works. Yeah. So they make artificially difficult problems that the miners then try to solve. That's not effective in terms of if you're only looking at energy usage needed to run the network. That energy usage is huge, by the way, related to Bitcoin. So it's actual real problem.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, one thing with Bitcoin is, even though there are a lot of other cryptocurrencies that are trying to fix different problems with Bitcoin, it's proven now and it's been around for many years. So that's kind of amazing that it's still. Yeah. I mean, and isn't it also that the technology itself, the algorithms of Bitcoin is working evidently because it's still there, and but there are other problems, like when you had this attack on Mt. Gox, where I guess billions of dollars or a huge amount of money was lost by ordinary people. What's the difference if I have money on a bank account? It's also just digital number, and then if you have it on in Bitcoin, what is the difference?
So bank has kind of a little bit of responsibility at least. So Bitcoin is, if you lose your private key, if you lose your password to somebody, you're done. Like you lose your money. That's it. Yeah. You gotta be a little bit your own bank, and you need to take precautions which you might not need to take with a bank.
Nowadays you have a bank ID that protects your money in the bank, but you could have that for Bitcoin as well, I guess. So it's a little bit that you trust the bank, but you can't necessarily trust places like Mt. Gox, even though they're huge. Yeah, so you can still lose your money.
So the question is really has to do with exchange. So the process where actually Bitcoin gets transferred into real money or other money, cash, or situations where you want to put it to a storage and you're using some other service than the actual Bitcoin infrastructure to do that. I think then there's a risk. But those scandals have had a lot to do also with bad systems and bad people. I want to say that actually related to the Bitcoin algorithm, if you take away the mining, which is, I think, kind of interesting and brilliant innovation as such, but if you take it away, the core algorithms, it's basically just two, are relatively simple. So there is figuring out the addressing system and sending the money, another one checking that there is enough onto the ledger. That simplicity actually has to do with that they've been able to test it. And that's why also it's relatively reliable and has been for a number of years. And if it would be somehow dramatically flawed, it would be quite apparent pretty fast.
It would make use of that flaw. But one place where Bitcoin maybe hasn't succeeded then is the ease of use and being able to pay in a normal store with the Bitcoins. I mean, there are some places where they actually allow it, but I guess there are few and far between.
Yeah.
You can't rely on just walking around with the Bitcoin wallet around town.
One of the best objections towards like Bitcoin seems to be good solution, but you can't really do much with it. So you can hoard it. You can have it on your account, or you can do one-to-one transactions with it, but it's difficult to use it as a payment system. And if it's intended to be a payment system, this is a little bit of a problem.
What do you think about the Libra project by Facebook? It's been very publicized in the last few months, I guess. And if they succeeded with this, it would probably, they have the size and reach to be able to actually make practical use of a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing project. I've been monitoring it quite closely, so it's going to be interesting how it's going to develop.
I guess they had some hurdles. They've been had to answer difficult questions in the Senate. Mark Zuckerberg himself, and then some big entities have pulled out of the project.
Yeah, well, say the most credible credit card companies and a few of the payment systems withdrew from the project. So I think it's a really interesting project. Anyone who's interested, I really recommend looking more in detail into that, because Facebook has tried to build a payment system before. I think they have like 2 different tries already with that, and nobody used them. Couldn't really do much except buy more advertising from Facebook. They've tried it a little bit, but they couldn't get usage of this. And I think what was pretty brilliant from their marketing team is that said, okay, now we're going to build a cryptocurrency, because one thing that cryptocurrencies have, which their previous systems didn't have, is that people can just get these tokens and let them sit on their account. And they will add, probably increase in value.
They want to become a bank, essentially, and
yeah, but it's also it's a new use.
Source of speculation.
yeah, there's definitely a speculative element in there. So
we've all heard about those people who were early adopters, and they spent maybe $10, and then they became millionaires or multimillionaires.
They have an idea that they would actually keep the value of the money relatively constant.
That's the problem with Bitcoin. The volatility is going up and down a lot every day. So
exactly, and well, depends on what you compare. But you're right, it does that. What was the original sales pitch is that it actually shouldn't be so volatile with this system, because it's backed by real currency. There's no need why it would kind of go up and down like this. We'll see, but I'm guessing it
Proof is in the pudding, as they say.
I'm guessing it's going to be relatively similar to other cryptocurrencies we've already seen. I don't see a kind of how could it be very dramatically different. The ones who are driving that initiative do know this. They know that the price will likely go up because people buy it for speculative reasons. But I want to mention that might not be able to launch it in many countries, or European Union might actually stop the whole thing.
I guess one reason that lawmakers are not particularly keen on projects like Libra is that they see that shadowy elements will have yet another way to transfer money, and it can, in many of these cryptocurrencies, be hard to track.
Yeah, that's. But Facebook could at least a little bit control that, but I think there is a more fundamental reason which has to do with control of monetary policy.
Losing control in itself is a problem also.
It might be, I'm not saying would it be, but it might be different if the actor was somebody else than Facebook also, because they have had a number of issues related to regulations.
Definitely. They've been in both Senate and EU Parliament before, so...
Yeah.
Do you happen to know, there was someone, when I asked around the office for questions, someone mentioned that there was a rumor at least that North Korea was good in hacking different exchanges and earning money on cryptocurrencies. Is that a widespread rumor, or is it known that that's the case? Or
what is known? So I don't have any empirical evidence, but there are some papers at least that would indicate that this is the case. So that some some countries, maybe also North Korea kind of among them, are using some of the cryptocurrencies to kind of evade, for example, international trade sanctions that have been imposed on these countries. And so that's one of the interests why some of the cryptocurrencies have been, for example, developed in both Venezuela and also in some other areas where kind of international monetary or moving funds from one country to another is a problem. I wouldn't be so surprised.
So I think we have to mention also, talking so much about Bitcoin and blockchain here, that, I mean, blockchain was actually invented by, one or several unidentified people. And there was this alias Satoshi Nakamoto, and this happened in 2008, so it's a long time ago. What have you heard about that? Is there some consensus on who this alias might be in real life?
I have no information about that. But it's also worth noting that, so what kind of adds to the mystery is that there hasn't been activity. This person or group was relatively active in the beginning of Bitcoin, like the first
you can
3
see
years.
through the ledger what happened to the money. And this person or persons should be extremely wealthy if they just used their money in Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. During a number of years, people have kind of claimed to be this person, but then it's been kind of difficult for them to prove it.
Yeah.
And what adds to the mystery is that it's very easy to prove who this person is, because if the person is able to use one of those early accounts, that means that they have the private key of Satoshi Nakamoto. And you would just need to send a message in the system or send some monetary transaction saying that this is me. That would, without any shadow of doubt, explain who it would be.
But it's not you, right?
No, I don't think so.
Not officially, no.
No,
Okay.
I don't. It's not me. One of the interesting scenarios is a future where Satoshi maybe returns.
Yeah.
I think he might be bigger than Jesus
Sounds
in some
like
circles.
Jesus, yeah.
Exactly. He would be. In some circles, he would be that in that category. But people also think that might be a huge risk. So what if this person might well, yes, but also power on top of money.
And he actually created money out of thin air with the algorithm, he or them. So that's also pretty cool, just from an idea. I mean, it's also a little bit, it of course adds to drama and storytelling around this, that you have this alias.
For sure.
And I mean, it's a little bit like Banksy. There's a certain drama around that you don't actually know who he is. And there as well, there's lots of speculation and, articles pointing credibly at a certain person, but don't really know still who it actually is.
Yeah, and of course it's also possible that that person might have passed or might have lost his keys, which might be an interesting turn of events if that was the case.
Yeah, exactly. There is something called Shor's algorithm that one might say is mathematically proven to break the blockchain. Is that something you could elaborate on, what that is?
That goes well beyond my mathematical skills. So I think this is related to the questions
Quantum computing.
compute.
So we're not quite there yet, but I guess there as well, Google at some point quote unquote claimed quantum supremacy, but doing something which others then said was pretty simple, but quantum computers seems to be coming, and is there a risk there that if you're holding a lot of bitcoins that you might, there is a risk in if that algorithm holds true?
I wouldn't dramatize that risk too much, partly because if quantum computing becomes widely, we have a lot of other problems also in the society at that point. So this is not the only one.
I guess if quantum computers materialize and let's say NSA had it, then they could break any of the current encryption methods that we use, or many of them at least.
Yes.
So one cool thing about you is that you've also been a visiting scholar at Harvard, at Stanford, and at London School of Economics.
Yeah, so I've been a little bit of a traveling academic. I'm originally from Finland, so I've been going where the road takes me. So last year I was in Weatherhead Center in Harvard, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and one of the main points to go there was actually to have a look at both governance aspects related to blockchain systems, but also be closer to especially MIT and what's going on in their labs, but also to kind of what is going on in that scene more general. And of course, those have been really formative experiences for me.
And how does your research now at Gothenburg University compare to research that's done like elsewhere in the world?
So as I mentioned, one of our things that we are specifically interested is the public sector use cases. And that's something that we're pretty good in general in Sweden, but also in our university.
And if you were to sell that idea, why should public sector use it?
I wouldn't say that public sector must use it for a number of things. I would say that there are some use cases which they really need to be aware.
There's an opportunity.
I think there's definitely opportunity. One of the use cases that I think is really interesting has to do with voting and different kinds of e-voting system.
We had the problems with an app in Iowa, for example.
That particular app that they had nothing to do with blockchain,
no.
But there are companies, actually several companies in the US who sell very similar mobile app that is actually blockchain based. They are kind of at least claiming that blockchain will actually take away some of the problems that they were facing in Iowa.
Sounds like there is a risk as well that you can see in the ledger who voted for who.
Yeah, there's a number of risks involved, but there's an interesting developments to keep an eye out. And there are a few other areas where it might be usable, but based on the empirical evidence that we have, for example, collected in Europe and also a little bit in Sweden, the pilots are not very mature yet. But if somebody has one pilot that would have actual users, please feel free to contact me. I'd be really keen on looking at more detail.
You can see the contact details here under the pod, so please contact you in those cases. So maybe a final question then. What do you think is the future of blockchain? How will it impact our society, a normal person today, the invention of blockchain?
Based on my own research, which is on public sector, I do not think that blockchain will be disruptive or transformative. At least we haven't seen much evidence of that yet. On the other hand, future, who knows what will happen. What we are seeing is that both in fintech in different kinds of ways and blockchain is being tested for a number of applications. And I don't think it's going to be as pictured in a few of the very popular blockchain books that everything's suddenly blockchain. It will take a little bit longer time. Now, technology, I think, is starting to becoming more ready than it was a few years ago. But I wouldn't expect it to maybe immediately appear on there's an individual users driving it. So.
Thank you. It's been very interesting to talk about this subject. Juho Lindman, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.